When it comes to the CNN Democratic debate in Flint, Michigan, this was difficult because both candidates actually performed very well this time. I thought there were moments when Hillary Clinton was performing very well, and then, of course, there were moments where Bernie Sanders was also performing very well. They both had the other on the ropes at certain times during this debate. But with that being said, I'm going to give the edge to Bernie Sanders because he put Clinton on the ropes a lot more than she had him on the ropes. Now, I'm going to give you some examples to illustrate what I mean by that and why I think Bernie Sanders won. But first, so Anderson Cooper should not have hosted this because he is clearly biased. A CNN tactic that you will always recognize is that as soon as Bernie Sanders is about to make a great point, he's interrupted. And this is the same thing when it comes to Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo. They always cut Bernie Sanders off as he's making his point, whenever he starts to gain some momentum. And this is something that's really frustrating to watch as a Bernie Sanders supporter, because although he did cut off Hillary Clinton sometimes, he always gives Hillary Clinton more time to speak than Bernie Sanders, and this is very frustrating, but this isn't surprising when you consider the fact that Time Warner owns CNN, and Time Warner is one of Hillary Clinton's biggest donors. So I just had to point that out. Now, another thing I want to mention is that Hillary Clinton did not directly attack Bernie Sanders as much. I just want to note how much of a difference this debate was from the last one. As her confidence increases when she thinks that she's going to win more, well, the attacks go down, and that's because you don't attack your opponent unless you think that you're going to lose or you're afraid of him. So remember what I'm saying now, and recognize that if Bernie Sanders begins to catch up to her in terms of delegate count, you can expect the attacks to once again increase when it comes to Hillary Clinton. Okay, so when it comes to the debate itself, I'm not going to get into too many specifics, but when it comes to shipping jobs overseas, this was 50-50 right here. I mean, it was good for Bernie Sanders to bring up the fact that Hillary Clinton supported free trade deals like NAFTA that shipped our jobs overseas. Yeah, it was the case that she only voted against CAFTA, but she supported NAFTA when Bill Clinton was president. She supported the TPP when she was Secretary of State. And these are things that are harmful. They do ship our jobs overseas. But when it comes to her response, well, she used the bailout, the auto bailout, against Bernie Sanders. So while he hit her on trade, she hit him on the auto bailout, and I felt like they were both equally effective here. So where he could have actually got her on free trade, she actually got him on the auto bailout, and I felt like he didn't answer effectively enough. He should have really hammered home that point. He mentioned, the Wall Street connections and whatnot, but I felt like he could have done better here. Now, one point where I felt like Bernie Sanders absolutely had Hillary Clinton on the ropes is where he always does. It's when it comes to Wall Street. He pointed out that he does not have a super PAC and that he's not taking donations from Wall Street. And he also said that she needs to release her Goldman Sachs transcripts. And again, anytime she does this, you can deduct at least a negative 100 points from Hillary Clinton because it makes her look so bad. And again, she refused to release the transcripts because she clearly has something to hide. And also, she used the same line every single time that nobody likes. Well, I went to Wall Street and I told them to cut it out. She changed the lines. She's not saying cut it out, but I told them to stop it. Okay, this is laughable. Now, every single time when it comes to Wall Street, she doesn't have a serious answer. She laughed at Bernie Sanders when he said, look, I'm your Democratic opponent. Here are my transcripts. Here they are. I haven't done any. Here's the thing, though. So he had her backed into a corner here. But the problem is that he stopped. I wanted him to continue and go further. Now, one great part is the Export-Import Bank. She brought it up, and she thought she can get Bernie Sanders on it, but she didn't realize that he had the facts. He had specific facts, and that did not turn out well for her, so another great moment for Bernie. Now, here is really why I think that Bernie Sanders won over Hillary Clinton, though. So, she effectively advocated for trickle-down economics on the debate stage, on the Democratic debate stage. Don't think that I'm making this up and that this is hyperbole, because you might have missed it, but it was really sneaky. She said that when it comes to the Export-Import Bank and whatnot, and how Boeing is a beneficiary of that fund, she said that she actually does think Boeing deserves these funds from the government. That's corporate welfare. That's trickle-down economics. When you give these huge multinational corporations corporate subsidies in whatever, the form of tax breaks and whatnot, well, the hopes is that it's going to trickle down. They're going to raise wages with that money. But guess what they do? They end up giving their CEOs bonuses. I'm not saying just for Boeing, but I'm just saying the logic of trickle-down economics, but that's what she advocated for. So that was a terrible thing for her to do on a Democratic stage, but she did do it in a very sneaky manner to where I don't know if people are going to realize that that's what she was advocating for. I posted it on Twitter that she did advocate for trickle-down economics, and many people were debating with me, no, that's not trickle-down economics. Well, yes, corporate welfare is a fundamental component of trickle-down economics. You really have to dig in and you have to know about the details of what's entailed with trickle-down economics. That's trickle-down economics 101. That's what she advocated on a Democratic debate stage, so that was gross for a so-called progressive to do. One great line, Hillary talked about how, look, I traveled the world on your behalf to all the citizens as Secretary of State. And she does this to cultivate legitimacy, but Bernie Sanders just randomly threw in, well, when you traveled the world, Hillary, I'm sure that you noticed that all of those countries that you visited guarantee healthcare to all citizens. And that was awesome. Now, her rebuttal was that, yeah, and we're close to actually guaranteeing healthcare to all citizens. We're at 90%. But this is a terribly misleading line because the 90% doesn't mean anything, because 90%, it doesn't mean that they're guaranteed healthcare. A lot of these people with health care insurance, they're actually underinsured and they still go bankrupt and die because they can't afford insurance if they get, or excuse me, they can't afford healthcare if they get sick, even if they have insurance because their deductibles are so high. So if we get to 100% with Obamacare, that's great. That's a step in the right direction, but it's not universal healthcare. So Bernie Sanders should have pushed back on this. Now, where did Bernie Sanders lose? He lost when it comes to guns. That's my opinion. So, did I think that he was wrong? No, but I think that in terms of debate performance, I thought that Hillary Clinton is the one who backed him into a corner with respect to this particular issue. But Bernie Sanders did make a great point that I think may have saved him when it comes to granting immunity to gun manufacturers. He said that, if we do that, that would ship jobs overseas. The gun manufacturers would just not make guns in America. They'd make it in other countries. So other short things. So he did good on pointing out the sharp differences when it comes to their vote for the crime bill. He was good to bring up his civil rights history. He doesn't do this enough. He was good to bring up the welfare reform bill that Hillary Clinton pushed for as First Lady. That was basically written by Republicans and signed by Bill Clinton. Look, he put up a little bit of a fight, but in the end, he ended up conceding and he signed Republican welfare into law that gutted welfare, made it more difficult for people to qualify for welfare, and made it so that way people get less benefits even if they do qualify. This was terrible reform. It increased poverty. So I don't think that he should have let her go on this one. I really wish that Bernie Sanders would have pushed further for that, because this is one more area where Hillary Clinton illustrates that she can't get it right the first time. Okay, so childhood education, both of them did not do a good job when it comes to listing your priorities. I thought Hillary did a better job at explaining specific plans that she would implement, but it wasn't comprehensive enough. Now, when it comes to fracking, Hillary Clinton had to walk a fine line here. She was being very careful with her words because she has a lot of conditions, but in the end, let's be real, she's in favor of it. She sold fracking to the world as Secretary of State. This is the headline of an Intercept article. You can look it up on Google. And Bernie Sanders was phenomenal here. He said, my answer is a lot shorter. No, I don't support fracking. And then Anderson Cooper hit back and said, well, look, are the Democratic governors who support fracking wrong? Bernie Sanders said yes. So he needs to mention how she pushed for fracking as Secretary of State more, because I think that this is a really, really important point. And the fact that he has an unequivocal stance against fracking illustrates that he's really serious about climate change, whereas that's not the case with Hillary Clinton. She's taking money from the fossil fuel industry, and I believe he did point this out. I'm glad that he mentioned this, but he could hit her so hard here, because climate change is one of the most important issues in this presidential race, and Hillary Clinton, we can't trust her on it. So she said, look, the president can't go ordering people around, when it comes to fracking and climate change and whatnot. But what she's trying to do, to translate that for you guys, she's basically saying, look, I'm going to let them do what they want. If these companies want to frack, I'm only the president. I'm not a goddess. I can't do everything. But look, no, if you're president, especially the president of the United States, you can be a leader on climate change. You can literally change the world. The U.S. has to lead on this issue, okay? I say that, we're not the world's police, but when it comes to climate change, we gotta be the world's police. We gotta lead on this issue if we actually want to save humanity. And yes, that's really what's at stake here. Okay, so another great moment for Bernie Sanders is how he brought up how he outperforms Hillary Clinton when it comes to hypothetical matchups against Donald Trump. He should have mentioned the other Republicans too, but this was a great moment. So once you have that national debate stage, you really got to crush these myths that just won't die. And this was a great moment for him to do that. So now I want to get to the God question. So Bernie Sanders was asked, do you think God is relevant? And Bernie had a great answer, but this is not a very good question. Now Hillary Clinton was asked, well, who do you pray for? Look, here's the thing. This is not something that we want to be asking, especially at a Democratic debate stage. There's a thing called separation of church and state. I don't care what religion or how much a candidate prays. What I care about is their policy positions. See, this is a very Christian-centered question. Now, that's fine. Like, you can be a Christian. I'm not against you. But the problem is that this sets up a standard so that way if Bernie Sanders said God isn't relevant, or if Hillary Clinton said I don't pray, that it would be bad. It's implied that it would be bad. So if you're not a Christian, if you're an atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're a Muslim perhaps, if you're not a Christian, then you're automatically doomed with this question. So the Democratic Party should not be entertaining these types of questions. The Democratic Party is supposed to be standing for the separation of church and state. So when it comes to God and politics, they gotta be separate. So I don't care what these candidates believe. What matters is their policy position. So I thought that this was a stupid question for them to ask at the Democratic debate. So in the end, there were better moments for Bernie Sanders than there were for Hillary Clinton. She had him on the ropes a couple of times, again, like I said in the beginning, but he did better, I believe, in the end. What I think is that he should have been a little bit more aggressive in pointing out their sharp differences, because there's so many differences when it comes to Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Basically, when you look at the Democratic electorate, there are still many people who support Hillary Clinton because they believe that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are basically the same. They think the differences are nominal. But that's not the case. These are two very, very, very different candidates. One takes money from Wall Street, one has a super PAC, one is beholden to those special interests, and the other is not. The other is changing the way that we play the game of politics, like Obama said he would do, but Bernie Sanders is actually putting his money where his mouth is. He's raising so much money. He outraised Hillary Clinton in February, and he doesn't have a super PAC. He's not taking money from billionaires. So Bernie Sanders has got to highlight these differences, because if many Democratic voters think that they're the same, then he's got to get the message out there more. And the debate stage is the perfect opportunity for that. But in the end, he did outperform her. He did do a better job than she did, in my opinion. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think.